working from France
and do something for somebody else.
All that money.
I always wanted to say that.
And double thanks to you, OneHelloWorld guy, because I really needed to get this off of my chest.
I've brought with me voicemails made by people from all around the planet. I'd like to share with you their stories and the story of a project called OneHelloWorld. Anybody can call 316-247-0421. I'll never pick up, but you can leave me a voicemail. It can be about anything you want. Just be yourself, be genuine. Call as much as you'd like and as often as you'd like. You'll remain anonymous. And then I'll do the best I can writing music to your message. Some call it a soundtrack to your thoughts. 4 years and 120 tracks later, OneHelloWorld has come to be much more than that. It started with a single recording, an experiment with friends. After seeing the movie Inception and hearing Hans Zimmer's film score, I hurried home to record some related musical ideas. Alone, it was empty. It was missing something. So I set up a Google Voice account, which let me take phone calls online. On Facebook and Twitter, I invited my friends to ring the phone number and tell me what happiness meant to them.
Total financial autonomy. Happiness is a gin and tonic, some live jazz music, and a fine evening with friends.
After about a dozen calls came in, I laid them into my composition and posted the result to my Facebook page. I thought that was it, a neat little trope I created with friends. But then something interesting happened. I kept receiving voicemails. Somehow, people I didn't know found the Google Voice phone number. Strangers were leaving anonymous voicemails about their lives.
I think everyone is so beautiful.
I was thrilled, obsessed even. I was party to these caller stories and secrets. In the days following my first post, I'd rush home from work and make music, sometimes 2 tracks in a night. After finishing each soundtrack, I'd post the track back to my online profile. After a couple weeks, I did what every self-respecting internet artist would do and started a Tumblr blog. I'd post my tracks to the hashtags that represented the topics of the caller's story. In doing this, people on Tumblr previously unfamiliar with the project turned these voicemail soundtracks into conversations. A man's story about falling in love with his best friend in return received whole essays by people who had experienced the same.
Maybe a warning for everyone else. That's the worst thing you can do is fall in love with your best friend.
A teenager who had recently come out to his family as gay was rejected by them, but embraced by a compassionate and supportive community. A woman struggling with the choice between adoption or abortion received hundreds of comments from all sides of the controversial issue, with some responders going so far as to leave voicemails with their own perspectives.
Hi, so I'm actually calling in response to one of the OneHelloWorlds that was recently posted. It's titled, "I Think I'm Going to Get an Abortion."
As more voicemails poured in, the topics grew in scope, ranging from the globally impactful to the intimately personal. Gay marriage, Occupy Wall Street, Osama bin Laden, love, friendship, growing up. OneHelloWorld had grown into a collection of individual perspectives captured in a given time, each set to their own musical score. For some tracks, the music making itself became an international conversation. In the spring of 2012, I was invited to SoundCloud's San Francisco headquarters for an opportunity to meet other musicians whose projects were growing in the online space. This touched off international connections, receiving remixes and invitations to collaborate from musicians I'd never met. Painters and sketch artists were visualizing the stories of callers, all of it serving as an extension of these very personal accounts from everyday people. As the media coverage began to reach across borders, so too did the project's voicemails. As a result, I was receiving more messages than I could ever record music to. From this, an interesting perspective came into view. Despite that I was receiving calls from people living in very different situations, sometimes speaking an entirely different language, their messages were not entirely lost if I couldn't record music to them. In listening to every voicemail that came in, I found striking commonalities among many of the messages. The same content, the same expression, the same tone, and sometimes the exact same choice of words. So, by then, in selecting voicemails to write music to, it was as if I was selecting ambassadors to the particular aspects of human experience. The callers I posted to the Tumblr were speaking for many callers, strangers they didn't know, having the same experience. Of course, it's already evident that Earth is a swirling mass of over 7 billion people that are, despite our differences, living parallel lives. So, what is it about OneHelloWorld that makes it a very special experience for people? How has it bridged cultural gaps and defied borders? Why does it inspire sympathies between people who otherwise wouldn't talk to each other, or perhaps be nationalistically opposed? After my first track, I'd only ever received calls from complete strangers. But one time, I received a call with a voice I was familiar with. We didn't have much in common. He was a car guy with a football player build, a working man in the oil industry. But he left me one of the most vulnerable voicemails I've ever received. A few years before, he lost his father to cancer. The message wasn't to me, it wasn't to the world, it was to him.
I miss you, Dad. And I'm just calling to make sure you know, since I never told you that I want to be like you. And I hope you're proud of me.
It was the kind of message that draws sympathy even for those of us who haven't experienced something the same. But it wasn't until I began recording the voicemail soundtrack that my feelings became distinct, almost real. Personal, in fact, like it was a loss that I too had experienced. And that's when the essence of the project became clear to me. Think of when you go to the movies. They have engrossing screenplays, actors that connect us to the characters, and shots that make us feel like we're there. But for many moviegoers, what draws on their emotions, taking them beyond the spectatorial perspective, making them feel what the characters are feeling, are the moments when the film score swells. It's the freedom in Braveheart, the panic in Gravity, the magic in Harry Potter, the terror in The Exorcist, and the mourning in Schindler's List. Music makes us feel.
When cancer took you away from us 2.5 years ago, I did my best to become a role model for my little bro and to just try to begin to fill the void that you left when you went away. I feel so helpless. I would give anything and everything away just to hear your voice again, to have a hug. I miss you, Dad.
About God or the afterlife or whatever else have you. No one really does, I guess.
Now, this is backed up by a lot of science, such as McGill University's study conducted by neuroscientist Robert Zatorri. He used radioactive injections to track the release of dopamine in test subjects' brains when listening to music. Or a study conducted by Chris Sheff and Stanford University, who identified music's capability to arrest the attention of the brain, a phenomenon that's tied to our evolutionary capability to anticipate events.
Because I've always thought that it'd be kind of interesting if when we died, we got to see our lives play out like a movie. Like if you were alone in a movie theater and it was your story upon the screen.
Translated into musical terms, the ebb and flow of music stimulates the brain in a way where we can experience a composition's movement and anticipate what we'll feel next. Where our complex cognitive capabilities enable us to understand a story, music extends that experience by altering our chemistry and neural activity, physiologically bringing us into a caller's feelings.
You could just hear it one more time. all the things that built you.
Even though there are 7 billion of us on this planet, we share the same core human experience. The need to survive, a sense of community, the desire to be loved. From OneHelloWorld, I learned that the most common motive we share is the need to be heard.
Broke you.
Made boundless by music, we can feel each other's lives with an internalized vividness. If we all open our hearts and minds, like the listeners of OneHelloWorld, allowing ourselves the insight that comes from intimately experiencing somebody else's perspective on our common existence, maybe the world would be a more understanding place.
All the things that changed you. So you could just see and hear and remember, maybe, just maybe, understand all the things you never thought you would in this crazy life.